Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Investor How to Find and Research Great Deals in Any Market webinar. Thank you for coming along tonight. We do appreciate you spending time with us. We know everyone's time is valuable these days, so we'll get straight into the content and so on for you. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping first. Please ensure that your speakers are on and the volume is up and not muted. And also you can test the audio in your control panel of the GoToMeeting software under preferences. If you can't hear us yet, as I said, please ensure your speakers are on and turned up. Now, as far as any programs operating in the background, Outlook, Skype, etc., these will slow down the speed at which you'll be receiving the webinar, so please shut all those down if possible. And of course, the faster the internet that you have, the better the quality of the audio. Okay, the general advice disclaimer. Now, this is just put forward because we are doing this as a generalization, so we can't get your individual circumstances and so on. So before you act on any of the information that I'm going to present to you tonight, please make sure you put it across your professionals before. All right, myself, I've actually been investing in property personally for over 25 years. I work as a property researcher. I'm a qualified buyer's agent in several states of Australia, and I have professional experience acquiring discounted properties for investors, as well as several other strategies, but we're not going to talk about that as much tonight. And it also says here that I have broad amount of industry experience. That goes across to the building industry, where I used to renovate houses for a living and so on. Okay, so why are we here? Why, we help investors build and manage their portfolios. That's in a nutshell what Real Estate Investor do. Now, if we look at the amount of time we've been going since 2006, where we've guided thousands of people to plan the purchase of their properties, doing the research and so on, and also tracking them through. We've helped them build wealth through actually investing in property, and the information that we give from our software and the experience of our staff has given very, very positive results. Now, our member base is presently around the 300,000 mark, and you have three options with our memberships at present. You have the free, where you have all the educational content that we have on the website, which is a very broad range of things. If you're someone that wants to do it yourself and actually do the research where you compare and see what you're actually going against before you're putting your money in your pocket, out of your pocket, then you'll use the Pro Tools. And of course, for the people that are time poor or don't have the confidence to pull the trigger, so to speak, themselves, we offer the premium membership, where you have investment grade property sourced for you. I'll talk further about that later in the presentation, but we'll get into things now. Okay, at present, our partners, we have partnerships with RPNZ and also Verdi Plus for our mortgage brokers and financial advisors. Of course, there's Xero accounting software. The one on our platform here is specifically put together for property investors. Also, Valueit for appraisals and valuations. And of course, NZME, which is New Zealand's premier integrated media company. Okay, why do we invest in property? There's a myriad of reasons which I'm putting in front of you now. Building wealth, set up for retirement, retire early, tax benefits, additional income, and replace current income. I'm not just reading these verbatim, I'm just putting them all together because if we generalize, they're all the same thing. It's to make money, to give us freedom of choice, to be able to buy or do whatever we like, and investing in property is one of the surest vehicles for which you can achieve these goals. If we look at New Zealand at the moment, now we've only just got roughly 4 years difference from the average value in November 2014 through to roughly now in 2018. Have a look at the change in values on the far right-hand column. For the country itself, overall, we're looking at 41% increase in 4 years. Now, obviously, Auckland as well, which is a higher price point, 40% in the last 4 years alone. So we can see the favourable conditions with low interest rates and also the increased demand for rental stock, some of the reasons being inward migration and so on, and immigration, and the growing population. When you add the popularity that we've presently got on all the renovation shows, It contributes to people wanting to invest to create wealth through property. Okay, why do we invest in property? We talked about this before, just generalized, but if we see here, we're talking about a property here of roughly $20,000 income. I'll go into it further in the next slide, but we're looking at about a property around about $500,000. We can see here, once you put the information into the software, everything is done automatically for you. Whatever the locality is, council-wise in the area where the property, whether it be a house, unit, townhouse or so, the actual system will do the rates and the insurance averages for the area and everything all itself. Of course, these you can manipulate these yourself for your own personal circumstances, but this is just a small snapshot of how you can actually do the figures to make sure the outcomes from your research is more accurate. So, if we have a portfolio of, say, 5 properties, using the example that we just had of 500,000, we're looking at a net worth of $2.5 million. Now, with our example of roughly $20,000, if we times that by 5 by the 5 properties, you're looking at $100,000 of rental income coming in. What are you going to do with that money? Are you going to give up work, or are you going to use it to have experiences such as the ones that we're looking at below? Of course, I hear some people will be saying, yeah, but that's not all the money we're making straight away. We have to pay off the mortgages and so on. Of course, but there is no fast way to make capital equity. You can do it quicker than somebody else that was doing it at a high risk way, such as shares or something. But over time, if the earlier you get into property investing, you do your thorough research, which minimizes the amount of possibilities of things going wrong, then you can achieve this. You might have seen this before, the SMART goal breakdown. You know, what is your actual goal? And of course, if you're here tonight, it should be something to do with property investing, hopefully. What are the steps that you're going to do to achieve the goal? Is it reasonable that you can actually achieve it? And, you know, are the parameters there enough? Have you made it too broad, or have you made it too high for your personal circumstances for where you begin? And a big one, have you got the time? We are all time poor these days. So depending on what strategy you're going to go for and your personal circumstances, this is a very important factor. And of course, do you have the know-how? Do you need help? Do you need mentors? Do you want to do some of it yourself? These are all questions that you need to measure yourself. If we do this as a breakdown, be specific. You need to know exactly what you're trying to achieve. You need to be able to measure it in time, not just at the end, but also the steps on the way through to achieving your goal. Is it possible? Is it realistic? You know, we've got here, is it your goal logical? Now, of course, when we're wishing for something, anything can seem logical. But if it's actually realistic, it means something that we can or can make happen in the future. And of course, we need to set deadlines, because time, as it's put there, is money. Okay, now, a lot of people, when I've said this to them in the past, you must, if you want to achieve a goal, you've got to start at the end. They look at me with a very quizzical look on their face. All it means is you've got to see where you're starting now and where you want to go. What is it that you want to achieve? Because that is our starting point. We find what your goal is, what your end point is, and we work the steps back from that in measurable quantities to see that we can actually achieve it. Also, it's a good thing for your motivation too, because if we've got a long haul to actually get through to our goal, if we've got little markers along the way, which are telling us that we're on the right track, then we're much more likely to keep to the course and achieve that goal in the long run. And have a look at this. What is the number one reason that people don't achieve their goals? Not just in property investment, but full stop. They don't start. They don't begin. There's a myriad of reasons we can go into that, but if you are going to achieve your goals, you must put them into action. Okay, so we've got the property acquisition process. You know, of course, this is before we start doing our searches and so on. You must have your finance approval. because otherwise we don't know the amount of money that we're actually going to be utilizing to actually do our investing with. And this is the number one important thing. How much money do we have? Because it governs the strategy we can use, it governs the type of property we can have, and it also governs the actual geographical location where we can actually get that property. Of course, then you've got your asset class. Is it a house? Is it a townhouse? Is it a unit? And also the research. The research, which I'm going to show you with some of the tools later on in this presentation, is the most important thing. Not only can it show you hidden gems that you wouldn't have probably seen yourself without having the power of the software crunching a lot of the numbers for you, it can also highlight things that look good on the surface, but when we actually start to crunch our numbers and do due diligence underneath, it could actually lose you money. Okay, so we've got the property acquisition cycle itself. We do our searching, we analyze against other properties, we decide, okay, this is the property we want, we track the property, account through the equity, and we go over again. This is the replication process that we use, and of course I've gone over that very quickly, but we've got a lot to get through tonight, as far as building one property, pulling the equity and going again, or changing it to a multi-use second or third step. The process itself, you sign the contract, of course, do your building and pest. In that time, the clauses, of course, for your settlement, find your property manager, and the important part too, once that process is through, is to track the properties or portfolio's performance. Because there is many things that we can actually do whilst monitoring the actual portfolio to make it work better and to alleviate problems or find solutions to things where it's dragging its feet. It can be anything from actual finance, or you've got enough equity to go again. Whereas if you just did the set and forget method, which of course is the most simplistic, but it's also the one that least likely to actually help you get ahead. Okay, the tools we're talking about before, this is our dashboard where we can search, we can do valuations and comparisons and research, we can analyze the property itself specifically and individually, and then track them, not just one property, but as many properties as you like. You can track your properties via your single one, you can track them via the whole portfolio at once. You can find out from your loan to value ratio, your debt serviceability ratio, how much equity you have across the board or in individual properties. Knowing these figures in real time give you the availability to be able to move things quicker because you always have your finger on the pulse. Of course, the strategy is an important thing. You know, you've got to identify what you want to achieve from doing this. We talked about this before. It's generally money to do something else. But when we do our strategy, we are governed by several factors that we've also spoken about: the location, the type of dwelling, how much we have to start. Of course, positive cash flow incomes from a property is a good thing. Now, you always would hear the people say, well, you can't have good capital growth and good cash flow. Well, of course, that's the golden goose. But you can find some areas where you can get close in both. Your capital appreciation or the actual equity in a property over the long term is always going to compound more and more money and capital growth than passive income. But of course, you do need the passive income as well to keep the portfolio going. We can also do the building equity, manufacturing growth, whereas we'd add a granny flat or extension or so on. You're replacing your salary by a certain date or assist with retirement. You know, these are all goals that people have for using a particular strategy. Now, these are some of the strategies we can look at. We've just talked about the positive cash flow, which basically means that whatever we bring in, all our costs and at the end of the day are covered, but we've still got some bit of money in our pocket each week after we've finished paying everything. Renovations, being old or rundown properties, or even changing a property's use from, you know, a single story to a double story. This is a good way of manufacturing income and so on. But of course, the banks will generally not lend you the money to do the renovation, but they will for a renovated property. So be aware, if you're going to do that, you're going to need that renovation monies on the side at least, which is why that brings us to the next one. We look for discount properties. We can tie this into the renovations above as well as just buying discount too. We'd always look at around about the 70 to 80% mark of the medium of the property. When I say the medium of the property, that doesn't just mean, is it a house, is it a unit? It comes down to the bedroom count as well. Because if we're looking at a 2-bedroom house compared to a 5-bedroom house, they're not the same. They're not apples to apples. So we measure them for the same like to like. And of course, subdivisions. Now, I've had a few clients and so on which have started off their property investing life, so to speak, with subdivisions. I would generally advise that this is not the best way to start unless you have a lot of cash. Reason being, it can be overwhelming for the people who are not aware of the amount of hurdles that you will have, even in a smooth flowing subdivision and so on. But it can also be very time consuming and stressful if you're not aware of what's coming on board by doing it. Okay, strata titling. If we can get, say, 3 or 4 units on a single title and strata them. Now, this can be very cost effective to do it yourself, pay the money for the strataing, maybe sell one off and pay the loan down, and having 2 strata titled individual units for yourself. Dual income. This is, you've heard of turnkey, dual key, and side by side. There's all different names for dual income, but it's a very good way of getting good cash flow. And if it's in a decent area, when I say decent, I mean, as far as capital growth area, then you can still have good capital growth from the land that the building's sitting on, but your cash flow or your yield will be very good also. And of course, capital growth, purchasing property in an area where we know the values are growing and are expected to increase over a long period of time. The development, we could do that along the lines of subdivisions as well, where you're going to buy land and existing dwellings, whether you knock them down or not, make improvements, or even build townhouses and so on. This is a great way for manufacturing equity, but you need to have the experience or professionals behind you and the money to do this before you start. Okay, the asset class risk assessment. I think this is a great slide because it reiterates exactly what I was just saying to you. Have a look at development, right up there on expected risk, high. Of course, potential returns as well, but be aware, if this is one of the things you are going to try first off, you are putting yourself in a high stress category. Once you've done a few renos or you've done a few house and lands and some discounts and so on, by all means, go for it and do the renovations, the subdivisions and developments. But I would strongly advise that you start with something else beforehand. Okay, so we're looking at the actual keyword strategies. We're going into the search of our tools now. And as you can see, I've just done the whole of New Zealand and keyword strategies just all. Now, we can have everything that we've just talked about here. We can have it general, capital growth, all the way down to we're only looking for positive cash flow properties. Now, we have so many different variables within the tools that if you used all of them at once, there'd be no properties to actually look at because it is that detailed in the amount of information that you can actually draw down to. So we've got the different ones. If you have a renovation strategy, in the select keywords, in other words, you see renovator, renovator delight, TLC update. What this means is because we are purely a data crunching software tool, we are not actually writing anything. We are taking the information that has been gleaned from all the websites that are drawing into the system and all the actual listings from agents, what they've written in their spiel. So all the properties in our particular area, in our particular property type, and the amount of money that we've put it at, with these keywords in the actual listing material is what we'll get back in the results. Same thing when you're talking about discount, like the cheapest, desperate sale. Now, of course, you don't want to be thinking I'm prying on somebody else's misfortune. You're not doing anything. All you're doing is looking at something that's for sale, and this has actually been listed. Okay, same thing, the subdivide, subject to council approval, subdivisions and so on. Any of these little keywords that are in the listing materials will come back in your search parameters. And of course, the development side too. Okay, so the strategy of buy and hold. We've talked about roughly the house from before, that we've got a $500,000 house, market value, just at a capital growth rate of 5%, which is not huge and it's not bad either, but it's a steady gain. If we look after 1 year with the inflation taking into consideration, the inflation rate of 1.8%, we've made $25,000 after year 1, but have a look at year 10. This is us just taking care of the property, renting it out and so on. But look at the gains in 3 years, over $300,000. That's if the growth rate stays at 5%. If it's increasing, it'll be more. Okay, so we've got manufacturing equity as well. Renovation costs is roughly 10% of the purchase price. We can increase this depending on the area. You would never really want to spend, and I'm talking about a cosmetic renovation now, you would never want to spend more than 20% of the purchase price. And then the breakdown of that 20% is allocated to the most important room getting the most, always being the kitchen, down to bathrooms, bedrooms, and other rooms, and so on. We can see here too, the capital growth rate, because of doing the renovation, has gone up to 24%. Now, look at the difference from that first year. Now it's 620,000. We looked at 814,000 after year 10, and now we're looking at 961,000. So these figures you can see is manufacturing equity yourself. Same thing with equity of growth. Like we've got the surplus equity to invest. In other words, what the banks will let you pull out of the surplus equity in the property to be able to utilize for your next investment. And if we look after year 6, we can see that the equity in the property you have is nearly $250,000, but the bank will only let you draw roughly $115,000. And if we look at that $115,000 being roughly 15 to 20% of the next acquisition, it gives us a buying power of $574,000. So the manufacturer, same thing again, that was for our buy and hold. So in this instance, our buying power after year 4, $514,000. That gives us the choice to be able to go and get 1 property or possibly 2, depending on the loan to value ratio that you want to utilize in your next acquisition. Okay, you hear about negatively geared and negative things about it. It's it's down to opinion what negatively geared is. Is it good? Is it bad? Personally, I don't think you should ever try to get a negatively geared property. You should always try and get something that's appreciating capital appreciation as much and as quickly as possible, but not costing you as much. Of course, if you're buying the property in your own name, and I suggest you talk to your accountants about what entity you buy a property in, then you're going to be able to get some positive things coming from doing the negative gearing if you're earning a decent salary. So, we've got our pre-tax cash flow here. We've got all the years here. This is how much it's going to cost us before tax. Now, after we've got, our pre-tax cash flow for positive property, we're actually making money. So, you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to put money in my pocket or am I going to spend? It's not just a black and white and cut and dry like that. We're showing you what will be coming out of your pocket each week or going into your pocket depending on the type of property and what you're actually paying or not paying as far as getting money back. But that being the case, it's back and forward as far as you being able to keep doing it. If you want to keep doing and building your actual portfolio, you will need to have some and both. So of course, the negatively geared properties will most likely, or you will need them to be, into higher capitally appreciating areas. Okay, so of course, where do we start with all of this? It's the research. The research tells us what we should or should not be actually looking at further. It helps us identify growth with high yields if we're looking for that cash flow, or capital growth if we're looking for the overall value of our property to gain speed as quickly as possible. And of course, when you have a round of capital growth, it tends to follow rental yields moving as well. When you see something that's really charging ahead capital growth wise, you'll hear like a ripple effect where you hear about a sister suburb. It's the place where people go where they've been priced out of that suburb they really want to live in, but they will want to live as close as possible to that suburb, so it's the suburb next door. So once that happens, the prices of that one starts to go up, and of course that is something that we want to achieve as far as capital growth, so they're good places to look at for investing. Okay, so we've talked about the actual search as well. You know, it enables us through all the different parts of the tool to work out what strategy we're going to use. You know, the yield as down to the property or the suburb. Also the growth of the suburb, whether it be 1 year, percentage of the suburb medium. Now that being down to the type of dwelling it is that we talked about before, but I'll go into that further when I'm showing you some actual results. And of course, the suburb average days on market. How long am I going to have to hold on to this property whilst I'm selling it? The average, and you've got to work out, you know, this is going to cost me say $1,500 or $2,000 a month. The average days are 90. You know, okay, I need to put in that buffer for at least 90 days worth of paying the mortgage before I sell it on average. Okay, so here's an example. We've got a renovation, and I've just thrown in 50K from Auckland Central. I put the budget up to 800,000, and I put my strategy for renovate here. So you see the keywords that have come up. There's a myriad more than ones that we've got there, but just an example too. But I specifically wanted to look at a house, and as we spoke about before, because I'm doing a renovation, I don't want to pay more than 80% of the median of whatever that house bedroom count is. The reason for that is we want to save that 20% left for the actual money to do the renovation. So by the time we've finished, we've spent 100% of the medium, but our house is sparkling and shiny in comparison to all the others at the medium of that price. Okay, so here's an example of that actual search that I just did. I've clicked in and you can see the actual information that has come up. Now, an important part we've got here at Stanmore Bay, the first one. Now, the medium listing price. Now, this is not just for a house. This is for a 4-bedroom house in this suburb is $969,000. Now, we can see that this house is listed for $659,000, being 68% of the medium. So it's below that 80%, so it's worth us searching more. Of course, one of the first things we go in and do is look at the pictures of the property on the listing, make sure it's not sold so we don't waste our time with the research. Also too, if we're going to hold the property, it's important to know, you know, what's the rent, the average rent for a 4-bedder in Stanmore Bay, and we can see here it's $625,000. We can also see the movement of growth or lack thereof in the actual graph here as well. Now be aware too, this graph or these graphs will be very different from each bedroom count. So a 3-bedroom house, you can see we've only got a slight upturn for a 4-bed, but a 3-bedroom house could be going through the roof popular at the area depending on what's happening at the time. So we talked about the percentage of medium, the actual listing price itself, and all these things give us starting points for our criteria to either move forward or flick to the next listing itself. Okay, so if we're looking at positive cash flow, and here I've gone for Canterbury, a positive cash flow strategy, and my wants are that I don't want to have anything to come back in my search results that's less than 5% gross yield. Okay, what we've come back with is the first one at Auckland Central. We can see it's a 1-bedder unit, but I'm looking here for capital growth. I'm not being specific on the type of dwelling I wanted or so on. And we can see here it's above the actual medium at 110%, but It's the growth that we're looking for as well. And when we look at the photos and so on, if this has got better features, it's got views, the actual amenities within the property are higher, you know, sometimes it is viable to get something above medium because you can be getting something back for paying that extra. As you can see, we've talked about that at 469. You're only roughly 50,000 above. So in Auckland Central, that's not a lot of money in terms. But if we look down at this one here, the 3-bedder, it's well below. And even at the first picture, we can see it's probably a very different type of dwelling. With the median listing price at nearly 900,000 and this being just over 500, you would want to do your research if it was that low. Okay, so where do we start? You know, you've got access in this to CoreLogic and so on, so where we can find how many days are on the market, the actual sales in the property, you know, not looking at what people are asking in the median price, but also what people have actually sold the properties for. If I'm going to hold on to it, what's the median rent? Because I need to calculate this to make sure that I've got enough to either cover or that it's going to cover at the end of the week, at the end of the month, all the costs that I have. What's the level of discounting in this area? Is this got an average of 10% where whatever the price is, say 500,000, and people are buying them all for 450, if I didn't know what the level of discounting was, I could be going in at say 470, 480 and getting it accepted, and then thinking I've got a really good deal, whereas I've actually probably paid 20 to 30,000 more, not knowing what the average discounting of the area is. The comparable sales, very important, because not only does this show us the locality, the type of dwelling, the bedroom count, and so on, it gives us ideas about what has gone before us. In other words, what people have actually achieved, not what people are currently asking for. We have the low, medium, and high price ranges. So in other words, the bookends that the property should sit within via the parameters we've just talked about, the history of each particular property, and the listing history. This is important too, because if it's been on the market for a while and you can see through the listing history the vendors have changed agents a few times, it means they're frustrated or they've had enough of an agent and they're wanting some results which they're not getting. These can be things that give us the advantage in being able to negotiate further. Okay, love this saying, and it wasn't mine, I must admit. Love the numbers, not the property. In other words, crunch your numbers, do the research. Don't fall in love with something because of how it looks. Fall in love with something because of how much money or equity it can make you, because that's why we're here. We're here to make money or equity through investing in property. We must keep our heart out of it and think with our mind to be able to get to the end point. Okay, so we can see here what we talked about before, median prices and so on. You know, look at the difference in one and two bedroom prices in Auckland Central. And also the rents. There's only $100 difference in a rent, but there's a big difference in the median listing price at current and so on. So we're looking at, you know, not far off double the price with only $100 for extra rent coming back in. So it's important to do all these research first, because we might think and put ourselves in the picture, oh, I'd much prefer to have a 2-bedroom unit than one. But we can see from here, even though the listing price, in other words, what people are asking, has gone up higher on a 2-bedder, you're actually making a better capital growth and yield on the 1-bedroom at present. Okay, you can have everything from the changing in median listing prices and so on. What's the changes in a particular area? Because we want to actually research in areas that are actually moving up. Of course, if you are a notorious researcher, you can study the property cycles and then work out when things are just about to change at, say, 6 o'clock on the property clock. But this is a way of actually seeing where things are moving and where they've come from, because we need to know, has it just changed? Has it had a really big spike upwards, but the rest of the time it's been going down for years? All this information gives us little ticks in the boxes to show us that we're on the right track or not. Okay, days on market as well. If it's important to us, if we're flipping property, The shorter or the less days on market, the better in an area, because it means our holding costs and actually not getting to the next deal as quickly as possible are minimized. So this is important. Okay, all the for the visual people in here as well, the rental statistics. It'll show us, and you can actually manipulate this too over not just roughly a year or so like I've done here, but you can do it over several years and to be able to start mapping particular areas. If there's a suburb that you really like, and you can see, okay, I've got good growth there, the vacancy rates are going down, it's starting to become quite affordable, but I can see the trend through my research that properties are going to really go up here because the suburb next door has gone off and it's starting to become unaffordable. These are all triggers and ticks in the boxes going towards saying, okay, this is possibly somewhere that I should be looking to invest in. Okay, so I've actually gone into RPNZ here and crunched a few numbers. This has been very simplistic. All I've just done is over the May to November period this year, just put in residential one-bedders in Auckland Central. And as you can see, 390 have come back pretty much instantaneously. We can do comparison reports on any of these properties and actually go in and have a look at the properties themselves. An important thing too is how big is the property, because the actual square footage or the square meterage of a property makes a big difference to not just the feel of the property in the side, but whether your renters or your next buyers coming along will feel like they'll get emotionally attached to it. Okay, it's always important to do this. Now, when you first start off your journey into investing in property, you will not have, unless you're very lucky and you're related to someone that does this for a living, all these professionals in your back pocket. As you go over time, you will start acquiring your team of experts. A good way of doing it too, when you're first starting off, is obviously ask people that you've seen or know that are successful at what you want to achieve. If you know someone that's got 5, 10, 15 properties and investing, and they will talk about it all night, then you know that most likely they'd have a good property accountant or good brokers or had a good relationship with a particular lender and so on. Piggyback them, ask their opinions. This is how you get through and you'll start getting your actual team together. Now, as you can see, there's a myriad here from getting the money all the way through to actually selling the property or managing the property, and a myriad of trades as well. It's important too, your insurances. A lot of people forget this. Not so much when they're actually just investing in property, but when they're doing the renovations and so on. It's important that your renovation itself is covered by the insurances you have. So always make sure you've got the correct cover. Okay, a few tips. A real estate agent isn't your friend. It is in their best interest to sell you a property, whether it's good or not. Now, of course, I'm generalizing, and I'm not saying real estate agents are bad, especially as I have my license, but I only buy. I'm saying that they are working for the vendor. They're not working for you. So always remember that, and don't feel pressured into making decisions. Always do something after you've done your research, and the more information that you have, the more armed you are to make an informed decision in the correct manner to be successful. You can ask as many questions you like. If you don't understand what's been said, or you can throw out questions to the agent, just simply straight out, oh, why are they selling? Now, if it's a good agent, he will not give you the correct answer. He will say, my actual vendors and so on are doing this for whatever reason. It's his job, if he's ethical, to protect the interests of his vendors. But it doesn't hurt you to actually ask these questions, because you can get some information off some of them, that's for sure. When we actually look at a property, how many defects has it got? What are all the negative points? Tally these up against all the positive things too, and work out if it's viable for you to rectify all those things. If you have a price that you think up to, this is where I'm comfortable at, otherwise it's going to put financial strain on me, don't go over it. Do not get emotionally attached to any property, especially as you're doing this for an investment. You're not doing it to live in yourself. Now, of course, depending on the area, once you've done your research and you see the amount of discounting that can be done in an area, you're going to put your first offer well below that. So if we know that, using my example before, we've got a $500,000 house, we know discounting is roughly 10%, we'd never start at that 450. We'd start probably, depending on how game you are and so on, somewhere between the 400 to 420 mark, and then work our way with the goal of our endpoint being that 450. Of course, if you're in a boom market, and when I say market, I mean suburb, if you're in a boom market, you are going to get much less possibility to negotiate. It can even be that it still can be worth paying over what the actual person selling the property is asking for. Because if the growth is good enough, time is what's going to make your money. So the quicker you get on board in that, the quicker you can start making capital appreciation. Okay, so it's not always about the price too. We can negotiate through time. We can negotiate through the vendor's emotion or attachment to the property. The first thing whenever I'm negotiating on behalf of a client, I ask the listing agent is, what are their motivations? What are their needs? Because one person to the person next door is not going to have the same needs. One person will be, I just want to make as much money as possible. But if you've got someone that's been living at that property for 30 years, they've built an amazing garden and put their heart and soul into that garden, one of their most important things, excuse me, is that the next person that comes in is going to love their garden. That's a need for them. So we can look at all different angles. It's not just about the money. Okay, if you already own a property yourself or investment property, there is ways that you can actually make more money from it. You can, and I'm talking now from an investment property point of view, review your property manager. Are they doing a good enough job? Are they monitoring the rents as rents are going up in the time of the area and so on? Renovation, cosmetic and structural. Of course, if you're new to renovation, always go for cosmetic first, because the second you're going structural, you are going anything from 4 to 5 times the amount of money that you'll be spending. Also, it all has to go through council, where a lot of cosmetic doesn't, still going via the rules. You can add a bedroom or a granny flat to increase the dwelling count bedroom-wise. Or, as we talked about before, as far as good cash flow, convert, say, a 2-bedroom house into a dual living where you have upstairs and downstairs. Of course, everyone's on the bandwagon now about Airbnb. There's pros and cons, but that's another time we can talk about that. You can subdivide your property if you've got plenty of land and so on. And, what we talked about before, as far as not doing this for a first off, if you do have a property that's subdividable and it does tick all the boxes, it's worth every cent getting a professional to come in and help you with the process, because not only will they take a lot of the stress off you, they will be able to arm you with the information of what's coming ahead, both task-wise and monetary-wise. And as we talked about before, you can also strata title. Okay, what type of investor are you? Do you want to do it yourself? The pros of this, of course, you can save actual money. If you're into renovating or into actually doing investments and so on, it can be part of your passion. Even if you're not now, you can learn to love it if you can see that you're getting something back for it. And of course, the learning experience is valuable for replication. The cons, obviously you can make mistakes. Now, the biggest thing about mistakes is they can cost money. And as we're here to actually try and make money through the property, sometimes it's very viable to be able to learn off others or get mentors. It can be time consuming, and of course, what we talked about before, the stress and the actual time it's taking away from you and your family. You don't get access to off-market listings, and you're not in the industry on a day-to-day basis as far as being able to negotiate, as far as having your finger in the pulse the whole time. And depending on where you are as far as your research capabilities, a lot of the time there is the danger that you'll be buying over what the property is worth. And you know, I've harped on this a little bit tonight, but I'm sorry if that's the case, but I am passionate about it. Always invest with your head, not your heart. Okay, so the hands-off way. We've got the pros, obviously. The opposite of a lot of what I just said before. Time. Time is money. Now, if you're employing experts to do this for you, it's in their best interest to do the best they can for you to get the best outcome. So that experience that they've got and the research that they will utilize will save you time and money. They will be working inside the industry each day, so they'll have contacts and they'll also have their finger on the pulse about what's going on where. The process itself, a lot of it's taken out of your hands, especially if you don't want it to be, where all you have to do is sign paperwork and get involved as far as making the decision itself. It means you don't have to deal with other agents, any of the builders, developers, and so on. It's all done on your behalf. And of course, the number one thing too, which is not advertised, is access to opportunities that are actually off market. The cons. Now, we've got here buyer's agent fees generally charged 2 to 3%. Look, they actually go higher than that, depending on what state we're talking about, and that will be plus an engagement fee. In other words, a certain amount of money that you must pay the buyer's agent, which says, I'm serious about actually buying a property like we're doing, so you're not wasting each other's times. And also, some buyer's agents won't let you have your say in the purchase. What that means is that they will put something to you that they think you should buy, but it doesn't always mean that it will be done via your strategy. Okay, and of course, some are property marketers. In other words, they will have ulterior motive to sell you a particular type of property, not the best property that's suited to your actual strategy and goals. Okay, so how do we get started? Look, we set up your goals first. You decide on a strategy, what you want to do. Do you want to do just the capital growth? Do you want to do the renovation and so on? Once you've worked out what you would like to do, of course, get in touch with your bank or your mortgage broker or your financial institution and see how much you can borrow, because this governs everything you can do, and it's the starting point about where we move from. If you already own property, you can use some of the equity in that if there is enough. But of course, you need to get valuations and so on to ascertain what that is. Build your team, as we talked about before, of your professionals. The more and more professionals you have in your corner that you trust, the more streamlined the process will be in future for your replication. Start doing your researching. Identify the areas that you want to invest in. What the things are important to you, whether it be the capital growth or the cash flow or more immigration coming in, whether it be internal or external, where you can see things are moving the actual property prices. Now, we can help you to do all of this. Now, big question, what we talked about before, what a lot of people don't do. Are you ready to take action? Are you ready to actually start or continue on the journey now? There's several options we can do here. We've got for hands-off investors. We can help assess your situation where you're presently sitting. Look at the strategy of the properties, what you would like to do all the research and present properties to you so you're actually informed with information to make informed decisions yourself. Help you through the property acquisition, and of course, review and manage the properties in your portfolio tracker on the software itself. This is the premium membership I'm talking about. Now, it is an end-to-end solution for people that are either time poor or that don't have the confidence and so on to go ahead to be able to get good properties done in your back pocket, so to speak, via the strategies that you want to do. It gives you industry experts that are actually working for you that do this every day. I am one of those people that do this. I'm searching constantly for properties each and every day. And of course, as we've talked about earlier, the more and more you do something, the more contacts you have, the better you get at it, and also the more deals that you can see that other people can't. So it helps you achieve the outcomes that you would like to without the stress and the hassle. So how do we do it? Well, it's all done via the data. We target areas entering a growth cycle of the property clock, like we talked about before. We do extensive due diligence process. In other words, our criteria tick sheet going one after another to make sure that the property suits your goals. Whether it's be a mixture of cash flow, capital growth, renovation, subdivisions, whatever your goal is, as long as you have the actual means, and of course, when I say means, it's the actual money to do what your goal is, then we can help you achieve it in a much more efficient manner and increase the likeliness of success for you. Because look, not every opportunity is the same as far as the positivity for each investor. We can help you actually address that and identify that. And look, we'll be honest with you. If we think that you're looking at something that is going to be at your detriment, we will tell you, because it's our job to inform you what we believe is the best course of action, but you will always make the decisions. Now, the opportunities, they range roughly from 360 to 900,000. Look, of course, if you're someone that is doing quite well at the moment and has more than that, I have clients that I'm looking quite above that actual figure, but this is our main scope of properties that we look for most people. Okay, so your option 2, if you want to do it yourself. Now, you know, the actual tools and software I utilize every day myself to actually do the searching, do the comparing, and do the research on all the things that we talked about before to actually get the outcome for my clients. I do this using the Pro Tools. As you can see, these are the normal prices, but as you guys have come along tonight for the webinar and listened to us with valuable time, we're doing something we rarely ever do at this price. Well, not rarely, this is the first time, $79. Now, there's no steak knives in this. We're not going to say, if you do this, we'll give you 2. It's purely that. It's a month-to-month, no lock-in contract, so you can actually come on board, try it for 1 month. Something else too, if you are already investing in property, it's totally tax deductible because you are deemed as being in the business of investing in property. All you have to do is talk to your accountant or financial advisor first. We're going to put this through for the first 20 people because at this price, the margins obviously for the company are not as much as well. So it's a deal that you need to get in on quickly. So we're offering it to the first 20 people tonight that sign up. All you have to do is click on this link or put it into your web browser and follow the steps through to actually get on board. Now, I'm going to hang around after this for some questions times, but be aware after that 20 people on board, then the link will shut down. So I'm going to have one sip of water if people don't mind, and then I'll come through to the questions. Just bear with me for 2 seconds, please. Okay, I'm back on board. Sorry, my throat is getting a little bit croaky and so on. So I'm going into the questions now. Just bear with me. Okay. All right, I'll go to the first one. Can I come in and out of the membership at any time? Yes, you can. The membership is available purely as a casual membership for $79. You can come back or in. Look, in the present time, this is a web special and it is more than this, but if you start at the $79 and you've come in, do some research on a property and leave and then come back, we will honor that, yes. Okay, just how do your statistics compare when dealing with regions opposed to Auckland's? Are they reliable when dealing with a smaller population? Yes, they are. It's purely driven by historical data, and RPNZ is the background as far as all the research we do on that side. It's purely from factual statistics, and any place in New Zealand that you can look at as far as house sales and houses that are presently for sale, it will give you the same amount of information. Of course, there'll be lesser property sales and so on done, but the capabilities are exactly the same. Okay, how much is the premium membership? Well, the premium membership, you noticed before that I talked about most of the time you're looking at 2 to 3% buyer's agent fees across Australia. We actually do our buyer's agent fee at 1.5%. Now, the rationale for us doing it a lot cheaper than anyone else is that we want people to come back and do it again. Now, I personally have never lost any money buying for a client, and the goal for me is that I will do the right thing by you, so you will want to come back and do it again. And also, it's a challenge for me too. Having that record, I don't want to jeopardize it either. There's also a $1,900.95 engagement fee that we talked about earlier, which is basically the "Are you serious?" So, because the amount of research and time that I will put into looking for any property for you is quite extensive. So it'll be driven by your goals, your needs, how much you've got to invest, and also the strategies that we're talking about. Okay, we've got a question here. If a motorway is built behind the property, will it increase or decrease the property value? It depends on how close that motorway is. If it's directly behind it and there's a noise factor, it will decrease the value of the property. However, if you're looking at, say, 200 meters from the motorway, if it gives you a much better direct link to infrastructure such as a major shopping center or city or so on, then it can increase the property. So it's always coming down to how close to that motorway you are. If you're too close, it will decrease. If you're just the amount away or a little bit further, it will increase the property's value. And of course, I'm generalizing, not for every property. I'd need to actually see that individually. Okay. How do I click the link? The link itself, if it's not working for you on your slide set, copy the whole thing and put it into your web browser, and it should be able to take you through to the link that way. Any dramas from that, please get in touch with us. It should work, and that's for Lance. I'll get in touch with you and make it happen for you. Okay. Next question. Sorry, just bear with me. I'm just going down to the next question. What suburbs are you doing the most deals recently? I'm not doing in any one suburb more than the other because of the different price points and the different clients that I presently have. That's governing most of the time depending on where I'm looking. I wouldn't say I'm looking at one area more than the other. I'm doing it via the statistics. I have clients at the moment that are looking for places close to water, which generally is going to increase the acquisition price. And of course, the more infrastructure you have around the particular properties, as long as it's not too close, like we talked about in the same instance as the motorway before, then we're going to be able to probably be paying a higher price as well. So in answer to that, there is no one place that I'm looking at the moment. There's several places I'm looking at, all for different reasons from different strategies at different price points for different clients. Okay, another question here. How many properties can I put into the tracker? Well, I mentioned it before into the actual webinar itself. Look, the most I've got at present for a client, I think, is 15. But you can put as many in as you like. The actual Xero software that comes with it, once you're getting up to really high numbers of properties that you're putting in, the Xero is a non-GST cash book that comes with the the actual suite of tools that we offer. If you need further than that, we can help negotiate and get and liaise with Xero for you to extend the capabilities of that. So, okay. Okay, you talked about sister suburbs before. How do we spot these suburbs? Well, that's a really good question. What we can do is look at the suburbs. Now, if you want to do it geographically around yourself, now the suburbs that are doing very well, look for the ones that have had, via your research, the biggest amount of growth in the last 12 months, and see if you can go back and measure it over 5 years as well. If you've had historical growth and say from the last year or two, it's gone up dramatically, even though it's been growing surely, well, then you're going to be able to get a ground zero, so to speak. Then start researching the suburbs around it. What has the growth been of those suburbs? Because you can bet whichever suburb is right next to this suburb has been going up really quickly. Now, if that's starting to get out of the actual possibility of most people being able to live or invest there, they're going to look to something as close as possible. So look to the suburbs around it that have the best infrastructure. By that I mean transport, schools, access and so on to decent sized shopping centres, amusement things like cinemas and things like that, restaurants, cafes, all these things. Like the actual motorway question before, you want to be able to get a place, if possible, close to all these things, but not so close that you're affected by the noise or the traffic from these areas. Okay. Just bear with me. Do you do much business in Hamilton recently? I haven't personally, but one of the guys that I work with, John, has. Rather than me go into individual stories about clients, which I'm really not allowed to do. Yes, John, my actual colleague, has been doing business there recently, but I have not. What happens if we later find out the property we bought through a buyer's agent is actually overpriced? Well, that's a really good question, because if you're given the research to show that it is not overpriced at the time when you're buying it, you're the one that's going to make the decision about whether you buy it or not. If you were doing it through us, what we would be doing, we're presenting you with all the facts and figures to show you that it's not overpriced. And we're not going to, twist your arm or try and congeal you into buying anything. Our job is to help you achieve your goal, and it's doing it via the strategy or the type of property of that strategy you want to achieve. So if you have already utilized a buyer's agent and you believe you've overpaid, there's probably nothing you can do about it now, but to negate it ever happening again in the future, I would suggest you would look for a buyer's agent such as ourselves that gives you all the information. It gives you the historical information and the justification of the research to show you why it's underpriced and why we think you should buy it. But you're the one that's always in the driver's seat. We'll never try and con you or congeal you or influence you into buying something. We will tell you what we think of the property, and it's always up to you to make the decision about whether you buy it or not. Okay. Does the software capture data from private sellers? Yes, it does. If the private sellers have actually put it onto one of the websites that we draw from ServiceWise, and we draw from a lot. So if they've put it on any type of owner sells the property themselves type servers or websites, yes, we will draw from it. Okay. Going through. Okay, so that's close to the amount of questions that we've got at the moment. If you guys still have any further questions, I'm just going through and make sure I haven't missed any. No, I've gone through all the ones that are there. If you guys have any further questions, feel very welcome to contact us. We're very happy to be very transparent and tell you any of the things that you'd like to know. But just to reiterate again tonight, that $79 deal that we're putting on, this is not something we do very often. It's only been the first or second webinar that we've actually even put it on. So if you are interested to have a go, especially at that lower price, I would suggest that you get on board quite quickly. And if there's no further questions and so on, I would like to say thank you to everyone for coming along tonight. We do appreciate your time, and we wish you the very best in your property investing in the future. Cheers.